Imagine a server where the best base spots never respawn. The map keeps filling up. New players keep joining, but the good land stays the same. So every patch, the same houses get harder to claim. Welcome to the server. On this server, houses are not just shelter. They are land, they are storage, they are status, they are future loot. And that changes everything. Because when players buy food, they consume it. When players buy fuel, they burn it. But when players buy a house, they hold an asset. And assets behave differently. A house can protect wealth. A house can generate rent. A house can rise in value. A house can be both a home and an investment. That is where the difficulty spike begins. If houses were only for living, the system would be simpler. But houses are also used for profit. So now, first-time players are not just competing with families. They are competing with investors. They are competing with landlords. They are competing with big guilds. And sometimes, they are competing with the dev's own patch history. Let's break the housing server down. A house price is mostly shaped by four things: land supply, construction costs, borrowing costs, and player demand. If one of those goes bad, housing gets tougher. If all four go bad at once, good luck. Start with land. The most desirable zones are limited. City centers, safe neighborhoods, areas near jobs, areas near schools, areas near transport routes. Everyone wants the same few places. That means demand stacks on a small part of the map, and when many players want the same tiles, prices rise fast. Player 1 sees this immediately. Player 1 understands map scarcity. Player 1 knows prime zones are not magic, they are just limited. Player 2 sees the same zone and thinks one thing: buy now, worry later. Player 3 looks at the map and asks a better question: can more houses even be built here? Player 4 just wants one affordable tile, usually far from the premium zone, and even that starts getting expensive. Now look at supply. In theory, if houses get expensive, builders should just build more. That sounds simple, but the server does not work that cleanly. Building takes time. Permits take time. Zoning rules slow expansion. Infrastructure matters. Labor matters. Material costs matter. And neighborhoods often resist new housing. Everyone says they want cheaper housing until the devs approve a new apartment block next door. Suddenly, the local chat becomes very active. This is why supply is sticky. You cannot spawn houses overnight. A housing shortage is not fixed with one button. It can take years, sometimes decades. Player 3 understands this best. Player 3 knows shields do not craft instantly. Neither do houses. You need workers, you need cement, you need steel, you need land access, you need dev approval. When any part of that chain breaks, fewer houses get built. And when fewer houses get built, scarcity gets worse. Now add construction costs. If lumber rises, building gets pricier. If steel rises, building gets pricier. If labor rises, building gets pricier. If fuel rises, transport gets pricier. Every input cost pushes the final house price up. So even when builders want to help, the server may punish them for trying. New supply becomes expensive supply. That means the fix can arrive already overpriced. Player 2 hates this patch. Player 2 sees a half-finished building and says, "Just finish it." Bold strategy. The spreadsheet does not care. Now we get to borrowing costs. This is the mechanic most players underestimate. Very few players buy houses with raw gold coins. Most use loans. That means house affordability is not just about price, it is about monthly payments. And monthly payments depend heavily on interest rates. Here is the trap. A house can stay the same price, but if rates rise, the payment becomes much heavier. So the same house suddenly becomes unreachable. Not because the house changed,
because the financing changed. The devs, like central banks, control this part of the patch. When inflation gets too strong, they raise rates. That cools the server, but it also makes mortgages more expensive, so players get hit from two sides.
Prices may already be high. Then borrowing costs rise too. That is how a hard market becomes brutal. Player 1 tracks rates closely. Player 1 knows cheap credit buffs housing demand. Player 1 also knows expensive credit kills affordability. Player 2 ignores rates until the lender menu appears. Then the debuff arrives. Player 3 adjusts expectations. Maybe smaller base, maybe later move, maybe different zone. Player 4 often gets pushed out entirely. Not because Player 4 did something wrong, because the required monthly payment now exceeds the inventory. And this is where many young players get confused. They hear that housing prices are cooling, but it still feels impossible to buy. That can happen when prices stop rising fast, but rates stay high. The headline says the market is calmer. The player says, I still cannot enter. Both are true. A calmer boss can still one-shot beginners. Now, layer in investor demand. When players believe houses always rise in value, housing becomes financial loot, not just shelter. That attracts more buyers. Some want to live there, some want rental income, some just want appreciation. Some big guilds buy entire groups of houses. That removes supply from first-time players. The house becomes an asset first, a home second. Player 1 understands why investors join. Stable demand, rental income, tax advantages in some servers, long-term appreciation. Player 2 joins late after hearing success stories. Player 2 buys at the top and calls it a genius move. Sometimes that works, sometimes it does not. Player 4 does not even get to roll for the drop. The item is gone before the menu loads. Then comes the rent loop. When buying is too expensive, more players keep renting. That pushes rental demand up. Higher rental demand can raise rents. Higher rents make it harder to save. And if it is harder to save, it becomes harder to buy later. That is a nasty loop. Rent drains inventory. Low inventory delays ownership. Delayed ownership means more renting. More renting supports higher rents. The server can trap players in that cycle for years. Player 4 knows this loop intimately. Player 4 is not bad at the game. Player 4 is grinding under a heavy debuff, and the debuff is structural. Now add wages. A lot of players assume house prices should match income. That would be nice, but houses can rise faster than wages for long periods, especially when cheap credit, low supply, and investor demand stack together. So even if income rises, housing can still outrun it. That creates the feeling many players have now. I am earning more, why do I still feel farther away? Because the target moved faster than the player. It is not just you, it is the patch. Location matters too. The server average is often meaningless. Some regions are easy mode, some are nightmare mode. A cheap house in one town does not help if jobs, family, and transport are somewhere else. Players do not buy the average server, they buy a specific tile. And specific tiles can become absurdly expensive. That's why broad statistics often feel disconnected from real life. The spreadsheet says median affordability improved slightly. The player says, not where I live. Again, both can be true. Now let's watch the 4 players. Player 1 starts early. Player 1 learns the map. Player 1 tracks rates. Player 1 saves consistently. Player 1 may buy a smaller starter base first. Not flashy, just strategic. Player 2 chases lifestyle first. Player 2 upgrades cosmetics.
Player 2 delays saving, then housing runs away. Then panic begins. Player 3 adapts. Player 3 compares zones. Player 3 considers duplexes, fixer-uppers, or slower markets. Player 3 plays defense and flexibility. Player 4 gets squeezed hardest. High rent, low savings rate, weak bargaining power, little margin for mistakes. One emergency expense can erase months of progress. That is why housing difficulty feels unequal. The patch does not hit every player evenly. Older players often entered before prices exploded. They already owned the asset, so rising prices helped them. New players face the inflated entry cost. The latter still exists, it is just much higher now, and this creates a generational feeling of unfairness, because in many cases, it is not about effort alone, it's about entry timing. A player who joined 5 patches earlier may look smarter. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they just spawned earlier. Housing is one of the clearest examples of that. So why is it so hard to buy a house? Because land is limited, because supply is slow, because building is expensive, because loans got pricier, because investors compete with residents, because rent makes saving harder, because wages often lag behind housing, because the best zones attract everyone at once, and because houses are treated as both homes and assets. That combination turns basic shelter into a high-level item. Not impossible to get, but much harder than it used to be. So what should players learn from this? First, affordability is not just price. It's price plus rates plus income plus location. Second, waiting does not always help, but rushing blindly can be worse. Third, the housing market is not a morality test. Sometimes the patch is genuinely hostile. And finally, understanding the system matters, because on this server, confusion is expensive. The housing problem is not one broken house, it's a whole map design issue. And until the devs change supply, zoning, infrastructure, and incentives, the difficulty spike stays. That is why it feels so hard to buy a house. Not because players suddenly forgot how to grind, because the base building system became one of the hardest quests on the server. Welcome to the economy. Welcome to the server.